everyone. So today, we are going to be talking about all the updates, news, things going on in the immigration world. If you don't know who I am U.S. immigration attorney Lillian Chihura, and I help my clients get green cards and citizenship for themselves and their families using the U.S. immigration law system. So we are going to jump in on the news. There's so many things that are happening today, and I want to start with some breaking news in the immigration world that ICE has an operation today called Freaky Friday, where they're basically targeting unaccompanied children that are 14 years and older and basically trying to scare them into self-deporting. Instead of going through the process that has been laid out for them to seek asylum with USCIS, and they are going to be offering them 500 if they self-deport. So this is things that are going to be happening today. We may be hearing more about this specific thing, but yes, it is called Operation Freaky Friday, and they are going after specifically unaccompanied children that are 14 years old or older. And unaccompanied children are children that entered the U.S. without a parent. So they entered the U.S. by themselves without a parent or a guardian. So these are children that should be protected but are not being protected, and will be targeted moving forward. So that is not something we want to know about. Like, that's not something we want to be happening with U.S. immigration. But when we get these information, we have to let people know. That's kind of my job, right? I have to let the public know what's going on. So if you do have an unaccompanied minor child that's 14 or older, you will most likely be getting a letter. That child will be getting a letter from ICE laying out their options about leaving the U.S., their options about getting the 2,500, and basically telling them that if they don't basically give up rights, right, give up their rights, that they're going to be in trouble. So if you do get that letter, if you know a minor child unaccompanied that gets this letter, make sure that they don't freak out and know that just because there's a threat doesn't mean it's actually going to happen, because there's laws in place to protect minor children going through the immigration process. Francisca, thank you so much for joining me. Feel free to say hi in the comments. And if you have questions, please go ahead and put them in the comments as well. I will be addressing your questions as I go along. So if you're watching this live, ask me questions. If you're watching the replay, ask me questions as well. Okay. The next thing, which everyone knows about, is that there is a government shutdown, right? As of October 1st, the U.S. government shut down, and there's just not funding for certain things. However, in the immigration world, things are still moving forward. So when it comes to ICE, like I said, ICE is doing a whole operation today. So this is clearly moving forward. When it comes to the Department of State, which handles the embassies, the consulates that do the interviews for people buying visas outside of the U.S., those are still open. They are still scheduling interviews, handling interviews. There's not really funds that are being withheld for those services. So if your case is at the embassy, you have an interview coming up for that case, just know it's going to move forward, okay? Unless you get an email directly from the embassy telling you otherwise, your interview is moving forward. You still have to upload your documents to the National Visa Center. You still have to do all of that. So Department of State, embassy, moving forward, business as usual. The next agency is USCIS, which handles all the affirmative applications. So for example, USCIS handles your I-130s, your I-485, which is the green card application, your work permit applications, your waiver applications. So USCIS really does handle a lot of those affirmative, meaning you are applying for something, not defensive, because you're not in immigration court, basically trying to defend yourself from deportation. So when it comes to those, USCIS is funded by your fees. So most USCIS applications, most, I will say 90%, have a fee. And those fees that are paid is what typically funds USCIS. So government shutdowns do not typically affect USCIS. Okay? Government shutdowns do not typically affect USCIS. They still move forward with their cases, with the interviews, with all of those. However, according to the director of USCIS, there's going to be some slowdowns with scheduling interviews because if you are not aware, USCIS is basically going from making decisions on cases to having more officers doing enforcement and investigations. So they're going to focus their funding on investigations and all of those versus scheduling interviews. So according to the director, scheduling interviews, processing applications are going to slow down during this shutdown, but fraud investigations and things like that are still going to be moving forward. So again, if you already have an interview scheduled with USCIS, you're most likely going to have your interview because government shutdowns typically do not affect those things. It's just scheduling new interviews are probably going to slow down as well. All right. So next up is immigration court. Right. We've done Department of State, we've done ICE, USCIS. Now we're going to do EOIR, which is immigration court process. So, yes. So Operation Freaky Friday, I will touch on it again. That's what I started with, but I am going to touch on that again. So when it comes to EOIR, immigration court, they are moving forward business as usual. Okay, they are not slowing down cases. So typically with a government shutdown, if you are not detained by ICE, the government will not move forward with your hearings and all of that. They typically during a government shutdown focus on cases that the person is detained. But with this shutdown, they are not doing that. Every single case, whether you're detained or not, is moving forward. Basically, they're telling us that immigration court is moving forward, business as usual. And we have seen that in practice. Cases are not being canceled anymore. There was some courts that weren't sure what they're supposed to be doing on October 1st, but they have basically figured that out and cases are moving forward. So if you do have an immigration case and you have a hearing coming up, make sure you show up for your hearing, whether it's virtual or in person. That is required. You have to show up. If you do not show up for your hearing, you will be ordered deported. Okay, so that's why I want to make sure that you understand immigration court is moving forward. Your hearings are going to move forward so that you do not miss a court date. All right. So because someone asked about Freaky Friday, I am going to cover it again. So ICE has an operation today called Freaky Friday, where they will be focusing on minor children that are 14 and older that entered without a parent or a guardian. So that's the focus of this Operation Freaky Friday, is that they're going to focus on minor children 14 and older that did not enter the US with a parent or guardian and that are in detention. So they came into the US, they were detained, and then they were let go. If that child is now still in the US, they are most likely going to get a letter from ICE telling them to basically give up their legal rights to seek asylum with USCIS and then give up their rights in immigration court and self-deport. And they will offer them $2,500 to self-deport. Okay. And then As part of that, as the children age out, because eventually you will age out 21 and older, you age out of the immigration process and are no longer considered a minor for this purpose. So they are really going to focus on these children and on making sure that they threaten them in a way that will force them to self-deport or to doubt their ability to actually get legal status in the US or legal protection. Even though they have legal protection, there's been legal protection carved out specifically for unaccompanied children, okay? Unaccompanied children have certain protections that adults don't have. And this operation is basically looking to take away or make the children feel like they don't have those protections and force them to self-deport. Right. Feel free to ask me more questions. That is the what we know so far. Again, this operation is going on today, so we're probably going to get more information as the day goes on, but that's what we know so far. All right, so I see some questions. Remember, ask me questions in the comments, okay? I'm just going to take some questions and then get back to the updates. Interview for this through marriage next 3 weeks. Should I upload documents and evidence 3 to 5 days before the interview, even though they didn't ask for it or take of it to the interview? So based on one of the last interviews I had with USCIS, I would say upload the documents. Again, make sure it's relevant documents, okay? Do not just upload 1,000 pictures because it will not be helpful to USCIS. Okay, guys. I am going to need a minute. I am so sorry, but I am going to need a minute. I'll be right back. I have FedEx on my door and I need to sign for a package. Be right back. BRB. All right, now I'm back. So sorry about that. Typically they come earlier than this. Now we work with what we got. All right. So when it comes to your interview, jumping right back in, when it comes to your interview, one thing that I realized at one of the last USCIS interviews that I had was the officer actually said, if you have additional evidence, they may not be able to scan it. So if it's like something that they're not able to scan right then and there, they may not even put it in the system or they may not take it. So if it's original documents that you want back, make sure that the officer can actually scan it. Okay? If it's original documents that you want back, make sure the officer can actually scan it. But to be on the safest of all safe sides, you can upload copies of the originals to USCIS portal before the interview. So that's basically the tactic that we're using right now for the interviews we have coming up this month is any additional documentation that's not just like pictures that we're going to hand over to the officer anyway. If it's anything that is stapled together, multiple pages, things like that, it may be better to just scan it so the office has it in their system. Because I was told that if they have to, not able to scan it into the system right then and there, they would need to keep it, have someone else, have like their quality control do that process. So they're not able to do that unless they can scan it into the system themselves. So make sure If it's not something they can easily scan, that you are uploading it ahead of time. If it's something that can be easily scanned, or you're going with copies of the documentation, not the originals, but the copies, then that's fine. Okay. Copies are fine. So make sure whatever original you have, also go with a copy just in case the officer is not able to scan the original. They will just look at the original and take the copy. All right. Francisco, I'm so happy for you. I know coming. I have an I-485 interview coming up. My daughter filed for me. My old passport is missing, but I have my I-94. I have a new passport issued in 2021. Is that okay? Yes, that is okay. As long as you have your I-94 that shows your entry into the US, you don't need the passport. Like there's some countries that if you renew your passport, they take the old passport from you. Okay. So it's okay as long as you have that that shows your entry and exit into the US, and that USCIS is able to actually look up your information and find you in the system. So do not worry about that. Just make sure you're going there with your passport that is still valid. If you have a work permit, if you have like a driver's license, state ID, things like that, make sure you go with it. The officer will just want to confirm your identity before starting the process. However, your old passport that you entered the US with is not required as long as you have proof of your entry, and the I-94 is the proof of your entry. Okay. All right. So if you have any more questions, please put them in the comments. So the next thing I want to talk about is a trend that I am seeing across the country, not just in my state. I am physically in Massachusetts, but I represent clients all over the US. So this is a trend that I am seeing all over the US, not just in Massachusetts. And this is, you file an I-130 with a green card application based on marriage, right? Based on marriage, we are seeing those being scheduled for interviews very quickly. And when I say very quickly, I mean within 2 months of filing, we have an interview scheduled. And I've had multiple cases with that happening, okay? Multiple cases with that happening. So when you are filing your application, if you're still in the process of putting your application together, just know that you need to start preparing for an interview, because you may get it very quickly. With the government shutdown and the announcement by the director of USCIS about interviews slowing down, that may affect that. I will see what happens the next month, right? But I am very much seeing that applications that are filed this year, and I mean this May of this year, are getting interviews fairly quickly. So do that with whatever you're going through your process. You know where you are in your steps. If you're still planning filing for your application, if you're already filed and you're just like, when am I going to get my interview, just know it may be coming sooner than you expect. One thing I would say is, in a lot of these cases, we are seeing that the green card application interview is being scheduled before even the work authorization is approved. Okay, so we're seeing that in some cases, and then we're seeing some cases where the work authorization is approved within like a month of filing. So it's all over the place. However, that interview part is not all over the place. They have been very consistent. And like I said, this is in multiple states. I represent clients all over. We have some in Massachusetts this month. We have California, we have Texas. Like, they are scheduling those fairly quickly, regardless of the state that the people are in, at least from what I'm seeing. So just know you're gonna get those interviews, and you may get it super fast. Feel free to ask me your questions in the comments. For those joining on Instagram, I do not accept video requests. So please ask me your question in the comments. All right, Barham, my wife through humanitarian parole. She is from Nicaragua. Marriage-based interview got rescheduled twice. Would hire you or is it just playing the waiting game at this point? Um, yeah, it depends on why it was rescheduled. It was all from USCIS end of things. So remember, there was a time that there was a pause on approving those applications. So USCIS may, right? USCIS did try to cancel some interviews, reschedule some interviews because they really couldn't make a final decision on those cases. They didn't know if they were allowed to make those final decisions. So it may not have anything to do with you or your wife, and it's just the program that she came in on, because there was a significant amount of months where they were not making decisions on those cases, and some offices chose to reschedule interviews instead of having those interviews and having the cases sit in without a decision. So again, it may not have anything to do with you or your wife. It may just be that. But that whole hold has been lifted. So they are now approving those cases. So hopefully the next time you are scheduled for an interview, it goes through and your wife can get her green card. But that is something that we have seen. Okay. So Hector's asking about DACA, and someone else is asking about DACA. So we don't have official answers yet about DACA. Okay. So the US government, of course, has been suing. Texas sued the US government about DACA. And there was a national injunction that came out of that. So USIS could not approve new cases. They could do renewals if you already had it, but if you were filing a new application, you couldn't approve a new application. What happened in the past week? The U.S. government filed a filing in court, basically saying we want the ruling, whatever ruling happens in Texas, to be limited to Texas. So we don't find no new things in Texas, but not in other states. Basically, trying to make it so that when a judge makes a decision on a case in one state, that it doesn't affect all the other states. And they're using the DACA lawsuit to basically have that precedent put in place. So the judge has not made a final decision. We do not know what the final thing on DACA is yet. However, if it goes the way that we believe it would, people will now be able to file initial DACA applications. So brand new DACA applications, as long as they met the requirements for the original DACA, the way it was written. Okay, so as long as the person met the requirements in the past, right? You met all the requirements, you can apply for a new DACA once there's an actual decision from that judge from that lawsuit. Okay. Right now, it's only like we think this is what's going to happen. There's nothing concrete yet. But once there is that final decision from the judge and we have an actual thing to announce about DACA, I will definitely do that. It is still not finalized. There's no court decision, so it's not finalized. But the way the U.S. government has represented themselves in this case, they're basically saying that then that DACA can move forward and that new applications can move forward. The only thing they said, this was specifically asking about the work permits, that DACA recipients should not get work permits. And anyone that limited to Texas and not to every other state. So when it is lifted, when they can approve cases, basically anyone else applying for DACA in any state other than Texas will be able to not only apply for DACA, but also apply for a work authorization based on DACA. Whereas if you are in Texas, you can apply for DACA, but you will not be able to get work authorization. Again, that's the way it's written right now. We have to wait for that court order to know what the judge does with that. But that's what Texas is asking for. And the US government is agreeing with them that they should get that. So if you live in Texas and you qualify for DACA, but also to work, it may be time to move to another state, okay? It may be time to move to another state. All right. Next question. But me having been a Honduras TPS recipient doesn't hurt me applying for DACA. No, it shouldn't, because TPS is not a permanent status. TPS is a temporary status, and I believe that has ended anyway, right? That has ended anyway. So no. My son came US on a visa and overstayed. He was 4 years and now he's 19. Again, depending on when he came, I'm sure it's within the time. I just can't do the math. But as long as he qualifies for it, and right, as long as he qualifies for it, and this court order comes through, then that would be that would be an option for him to apply. Okay. So yeah, I did put DACA updates on my list only because we don't have that final court order. But I have a feeling we may get that court order by the end of this month. So stay tuned. I will let you know once it becomes an actual, once we get that court order from the judge, so that you know what you can actually qualify for, you know what you can apply for. So make sure states for that. I'll probably do quick videos to let you know once that comes in, because that's going to be great. This is years. This lawsuit has been going on for years. And I have people that, are just waiting to see what happens, and see if they're able to apply for DACA at this point, once it's lifted. So see what happens. Hopefully it's what we suspect it will be, right? Hopefully it's what we suspect it will be. And that mostly that the work permit part of it is just limited to Texas and not to any other state. And like I said, if you're going to be applying for DACA and you live in Texas, but you also want a work permit, it may be time, okay? It may be time to move out of Texas. All right, I don't see any other questions. I'm just going to go through the points again. Remember, if you want to have a private consultation with me, you can do that by going to my website, lilylegal.com. Click on contact us and you can schedule a private consultation with me. And if you are still here with me live, make sure you like this video. If you're watching in the replay and you like what you have heard so far, please go ahead and like this video. Just let people know that this is a video they may want to check out. All right. So let's go through the updates one more time. So there is a government shutdown. However, in the immigration world, it's not, there's no shutdown, okay? There's no shutdown in the immigration world. There is a shutdown in every other part of government. So ICE is working fully. We'll talk about their Operation Free Friday in a few minutes. So ICE is working. USCIS is working, even though the director of USCIS wants us to believe that they will be slowing down scheduling interviews and processing cases because of the shutdown. They are operating because they are based on your fees and not government funding, okay? They are funded by the filing fees that you file. Excuse me. Excuse me. So USCIS is funded by the fees that people pay and not strictly by the government. So typically government shutdowns do not affect them. USCIS is unique in that. Department of State is moving forward business as usual. They are scheduling interviews. They are holding interviews at their embassies, at the consulates. So Department of State handles the embassies. If you have a visa application, you're outside of the US, Department of State is the agency that handles that, and they are moving forward business as usual. Immigration court is surprisingly moving forward business as usual. Typically, if the person is not detained during a government shutdown, the non-detained cases do not move forward, but the detained cases do. In this shutdown, all the cases, detained and non-detained, are moving forward. So if you have a court case, court hearing coming up, make sure you show up for your hearing because it's going to move forward. Okay. And then finally, ICE, let's talk about Operation Freaky Friday. So ICE is going to be running an operation today where their focus is going to be minor children, unaccompanied minor children, 14 years old and older, and basically trying to get them to give up their rights to applying for asylum with USCIS, giving up their rights to go through immigration court, and self-deporting. They will be offering them a $2,500. They will be offering them $2,500 if they self-deport and don't follow through with their rights to go through immigration process to get asylum or the status if they qualify for it. And then finally, if you are filing an I-130 with an I-485, so a marriage-based green card application, just know you're probably going to get an interview pretty quickly. So make sure you are prepared for that before you file. We are seeing this all over the US, not just in some states. So we've seen it in Massachusetts, Texas, California, New York. So we are seeing these happening fairly quickly. And I think the quickest we have had is about 2 months from the date of filing, they scheduled the interview. So just be aware of that. All right, next. So I do see your questions, so I'm going to cover the questions. Please keep asking me questions in the comments. We can do Q&A as long as I see questions, okay? My US father applied for me. I overstayed my visa. Now I received a letter and I need to file a waiver to go to Morocco to for interview. How long does it take to be approved? So an I-601A waiver, yeah, an I-601A waiver can take 3 to 4 years right now. So it is some waiting. It is quite some waiting. But once it is approved, you'll be able to go to your interview and come back with the visa. One thing I will say, because sometimes people don't know this, but if you are going to go the 601A waiver route, you cannot leave the US until that waiver is approved. If you leave the US before the waiver is approved, the waiver is automatically canceled. And then you'll just schedule an interview, be denied at the interview, and end up filing a 601 waiver. So instead of a 601A that's filed in the US, you will file a 601. Again, that's if you leave before that 601A waiver is approved. Okay, and then follow-up question, if I get my green card and I file for my husband, does he need to do waiver too, or he can get green card in US? It depends. If your husband, so this is what I was, if your husband also overstayed a visa, he would be in the same situation of needing a waiver. So anyone that's in the US that is not an immediate relative of a US citizen, right? That's the key there. If you're an immediate relative of a US citizen, your overstay is waived automatically. But if you're not an immediate relative of a US citizen, which the spouse of a green card holder is not, you will need that waiver for the unlawful presence. Okay, so he will need that 601A waiver if he's also in the US and also overstayed the visa. But one thing I will say, if the visa is based on your father, you may be able to include, your husband may be able to follow to join, so that once you get your green card, you can be the basis for the 601A waiver for him, and then he can get his green card, then keep the application open long enough to get the waiver, go to the interview, and come. But it is a whole strategy that you would need to make that line up. But yes, that would be a possibility. Right? So I would say look into that. Instead of starting all over with the I-130 and all of that, once you get your green card, he may be able to be included in yours. All right. So, all right. So I don't see any other questions. I want to thank you all so much for joining me. Remember to like this video if you have not done so already. Ask me questions in the comments if you are watching this on a replay and you have questions. I try to do these lives every single week. There's weeks that I miss, but I do want to say this. I will be changing the time of the lives to sometime in the evening on a Friday. So let me know what you think about that. So I'm thinking something around 4 o'clock or later in the day on a Friday, just because, you know, school's back in session, things are happening with the children and life. So I will need to change the timing of the lives, but I don't want to take away the lives. So let me know if a later time or a different day, right? Let me know in the comments. I really want to know if you prefer Fridays at a later time or a different date and time altogether. But whatever date it is, whatever day, it has to be 4 o'clock or later. All right. So feel free to let me know in the comments. But the lives are not going away. They're just going to, the time is just going to move. Okay. Oh, yes. So Theo, yes, absolutely. I am aware of Operation Freaky Friday. We've talked about it a bit here. It's going to focus on unaccompanied minors 14 and older, and that were previously in ICE custody and were then released to apply for asylum with USCIS. In those situations, they're sending out letters, threatening letters to these minors and hoping that they would deport and offering them $2,500 if they do self-deport. There's a whole thing is going on today from the reports that we have. However, we don't have like actual details of what is happening on the ground. Once we have more details, I will be more than happy to bring that to you. But yes, very much aware, and it is something that should not be happening, but it is. Okay, so thank you all so much, and I will see you next week. Probably same day, different time, but I will be seeing you next week. I'll let you know ahead of time before I change the time. Okay, I'll let you know so that you are ready for the change. All right, I'll see you later. I hope you have a great Friday and a great weekend. Do not let the things going on right now bring you down too much. Try not to, so I hope you don't as well. Bye, everyone.